This is not going to be a restoration as such. I normally restore tools and machines so that they can be used and treated as if they were new. In this case, the plane is a little too far gone to get back to usefulness. The biggest fault is that the front of the plane is cracked right in half. Hopefully we can glue it back together, but it probably won't stand up to normal use. According to the stamping still visible in the heel, this is a 2 1/8 inch plane made by Inox. I couldn't find any info about the brand, so if anyone knows more, please leave a comment. There are 3 numbers written in pencil. I think it's just a manufacturer's number and doesn't help with dating. I'd guess this plane is pre-war, but beyond that, I have no idea. So let's start by tearing into it with 60 grit sandpaper. No, I'm only joking. Hopefully I can get most of the grime out of the wood with methylated spirits and steel wool. I should explain the backstory. This plane has been sitting in my parents' back shed for probably 20 years. I decided to take it. The answer was no. Turns out it belonged to my stepfather's Uncle Tom. Tom's long gone, and I was surprised that there was a sentimental attachment there. However, that's when we discovered that the plane had split in half, and realising that, he thought that I may as well take it after all. Now that the plane has cleaned up a little, you can clearly see the crack. In fact, over the next couple of hours, it really started to open up. You may notice between shots that the colour has warmed up. Because of the crack opening, I had to quickly apply some linseed oil. I worked the watered down PVA into the crack until it was seeping out the other side. And then some more, just for good measure. The tricky part about this glue up is that the plane has twisted long ways. In other words, if both halves are just pressed together, one side sticks out further than the other. So I'm clamping it in a way that the force will align the split. After an hour or so, the join was holding, but not tight. At least now the two halves were aligned, so I added more glue and clamped it a little more firmly to really tighten up the gap. I've gone as far as I can cleaning it with meths. Only now do I break out the sandpaper. Just enough to remove some of the worst marks. For the bottom of the plane, I'm going to sand it down to a nice flat level. I was going to sand it over a grade 00 granite surface plate, but settled for a piece of clean plywood. Unfortunately, the plane has been affected by borer. There's not much I can do about that, apart from fill the damage. I was going to remove the rust with electrolysis, but I'm not 100% sure how that will affect the brass on the cap iron. I have some evapo-rust, so I put it in that. For the cutting iron and screw, I still used electrolysis. This is pretty simple stuff. Water plus washing soda and an old cell phone charger. Here is the cap iron fresh out of evapo-rust. Depending on the exact steel, evapo-rust can leave a layer of black gunk that needs to be cleaned off with a wire brush. It comes off easy, so long as you deal with it right away. And here is the iron coming out of the electrolysis. I guess the cap iron was in evapo-rust and the iron in electrolysis for about 3 hours. And lettering appears. I wish I could read it a little clearer, but all I can make out from the top row is WA and cast steel underneath. Now, this plane was likely manufactured in pre-war Britain, and assuming that, I'd guess the screw was originally nickel plated, which is good, because I can easily replace that finish. This is my DIY nickel plating setup, just nickel and vinegar in a jar, and the same cell phone charger I used for the electrolysis. In preparation for plating, the screw goes into diluted hydrochloric acid. In total, the screw was probably in the acid for about a minute, with a scrub halfway through. Once the screw has been in acid, it can't be exposed to the air for long or it'll flash rust. So it's straight into water, and I keep it submerged. Then it's into the nickel electrolyte. And we are plating. About 20 minutes later, a nickel-plated screw. This is different from every other video you've watched about wood planes. Sorry, no 20-minute segment about bevels and stones, no apron, no little beard, and no string guitar music. Sharpening and woodworking isn't really my thing. But I guess you guys are going to leave unsatisfied if we don't cut some wood. So I made an effort to get it reasonably sharp. I put bow shield on the irons. It should provide fairly long-term protection against rust, so long as the pieces aren't handled too often. A final cleanup of the flat bottom with 400 grit, and polishing the top surfaces with steel wool, 4 zeros. If I was planning on using the plane, I would have just finished it with linseed oil. But since it's going to exist more as a display piece, I decided on tung oil. That seems more fancy. And here are the parts, ready for assembly. I'm pretty happy with how it looks. Now let's see if it works. These planes have to be set with a hammer, and I was reluctant to hit it very hard. There wasn't much point risking splitting it in half. It cuts wood. It could be used. But if I wanted a wooden plane for practical use, I'd buy one without a crack down the centre. I don't know how many hands have put this plane to work, or what work it produced. And I have no idea whether this was a treasured tool or an unloved, necessary piece of equipment. People didn't buy throwaway junk 100 years ago. And I definitely wasn't going to be the person in this plane's story that throws it into the trash.